2 or 3 years ago, you did something on a base in Wiltshire.
Yes.
And I went down and took that story up. It was at RAF Lynham.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's MOD Lynham.
Huh.
And I went down there with a Geiger counter, and there's another friend of mine called Julie Phelps. I'm not sure if you've heard of her. She's ex-RAF and has been on the Mars base doing propulsion systems. She's talking at my conference in a couple of days' time.
Uh-huh.
And what I found was that the background radiation here in Devizes, which is the town up the hill from Lynham, that's beside a town called Wootton Bassett, now called Royal Wootton Bassett. There happened to be a Geiger counter in Royal Wootton Bassett, and that was on a global website where you could see Geiger counters all over the world. And this particular Geiger counter had gone over up to 120, and that was within less than a mile of the Lynham base. Now, the geography of this is that you can drive right through the middle of the base. You have the base with the runways and all that stuff on the left. Then you have the base with all the accommodation for the people who work on the base on the right-hand side in so-called civilian land. So basically, you're able to drive down right through the middle of the base. And I went there with a Geiger counter, and what was a background radiation, not very high, but just a bit higher, here was up to something like 16 or 20 microsilvers.
Yes.
When I went past the gate of RAF Lynham, it was down to almost zero.
Huh. Wow.
So I concluded that they were operating some kind of technology which could shield radiation.
Yes, they have that.
And why would they need a technology to shield radiation? Now, the bottom line is that where the collapse of that road was right at the very edge of the runway of RAF Lynham. And it had been a very substantial landslip. So, cutting to the chase, a friend of mine phoned up the council at Wootton Bassett, and they said, "Don't you realize you've got a heck of a radiation leak next door?" And of course, that wouldn't cause any concern or panic or anything. Mm-hmm. So we noticed that afternoon that the radiation was still at 120 rads. It was 120, and strangely, she'd had people phone her up for iodine pills.
Yeah.
And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the Monday, after we sort of started looking, I started looking around, I think on the Friday, that radiation went down by half. And then by 5 o'clock, i.e., when you're going home, laddies, it went down to a sort of like a 10 or 15. It was as if a sergeant major had yelled at somebody to say, "You will clean this up before you go home, squaddy." Now, that evening, I went to the local pub, and it just so happens that there was a number of rather well straight-backed, short-haired individuals drinking in the pub at the same time, who just happened to come from MOD Lynham, who just happened to be there, and one of them bought me a pint of Guinness. It was very decent of them. They were absolutely mad as hell, and I suffered quite a lot of grief on that. But it turns out, according to Julie, there were some Antarctic pictures where there's it's in the public domain, where there's a long sort of stripe in the ice and something at the end of it, as if something crashed. Now, Julie told me that was a Draco ship which crashed in Antarctica, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were using it to run a gate at RAF Lynham, and the Brits got its power source, and they were And one
Wow.
afternoon, it went bang.
Huh.
So
Wow.
I just thought you'd like to know that your little note, and all the other little thing about it is that Wiltshire is not known for its really good roads. There are all sorts of things happening with the roads, but that landslip, which just happened to be at the very edge of the perimeter of the base, got on global news. So why would a simple so anyway? It was something went wrong at the base, and now it's just an MOD base. And I mean, this involved the police. It involved quite a lot of heat. So I rattled some cages on that.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
I just thought I'd give you some feedback on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's quite a bit in Wiltshire because you have Rudlow Manor there too,
Yes.
and yeah, and then you have the Corsham Computer Center, which are both dumps. Rudlow Manor is the where the Royal Air Force, formerly RFA Box, is just outside of Bath there, and that's where the elites have their underground, where they go in case of World War III.
There happens to
That's
be
where, yeah.
a gentleman there who's able to repair my hard drives every time my hard drives have a bit of a hiccup.
Oh, at Corsham?
Yeah, just happens to be there, and he's able to fix hard drives. Doesn't
Well,
charge too
yeah, he
much.
would be because that's a computer center. That's one of the top ones on Earth.
Have you heard of a guy called Drago Reed?
No.
Okay, we're doing a conference this weekend, and anyway, we went to a place this afternoon called Minley Manor
Hmm.
in Farnborough. Have you got anything on Farnborough? I remember on one of your other shows that you've done, you mentioned Peasmore.
Yeah, Peasmore is part of the dump complex in the UK. Rudlow Manor, of course, is where they directed World War II from, in 1940s.
And that
But
happens to be beside a very long railway tunnel called Box, which I'm sure has only got one entrance in and one entrance out, and nothing else happens there.
oh no, it's all interconnected now. Everything's connected. So Peasmore is actually tied to a lot of satanic stuff.
Yes, I wouldn't
That
be
was
surprised about that.
Yeah. So Peasmore is where I'm trying to remember the guy's name.
That's where my story came in way back in '94. A guy called Barry King blew the whistle as a security officer there that they were
Hmm.
making transgenic beings there,
Hmm.
or shall we say, locally remanufactured greys with different types of eyes for use on, quote, the lunar base.
Oh, yeah, I remember now. It's Aleister Crowley
Ah,
involved in Peasmore.
he seemed,
Also in Cornwall near Zinner Cottage, he had a
yes.
place near the Menental Stones.
And the Germans had something down there, didn't
Hmm.
they? So,
You know, on that, Jane, there's a friend of ours called Bob Osborne, and he's written a book about Zenner. He lives out there. Was it the place that was owned by that man that you just mentioned, the most evil man on the earth? So what was his name?
Crowley definitely did do something there.
Aleister
Yeah.
Crowley. Yeah, apparently the Dalai Lama was trying to buy his property there recently, but I think the money became enormous. It was in excess of 1 million for this little sort of 2-room cottage that
It
used to
is
be on.
available for sale, but none of the farmers will grant it permission to access it from the road, so you can walk to it up the mountain or the hill if you want.
It's also tied to the Clouds House, which is entrance to a dome in East Knoll, Wiltshire.
Now, I
And
know
Cloud
somebody who
House,
lives there.
yeah, Clouds House was working with Aleister Crowley as well in the day. It's now with Castle Craig Hospital and the McCanns, who are the parents of missing child Maddie McCann. And that was all a satanic sacrifice as well. So East Knoll, Wiltshire, Cloud House was owned by Aleister Crowley. As I said, it was an entrance inside that to go to the Dome there. And it's a huge gateway for aliens to enter the UK. There's a MI6 NSA officer named James Caswell who met the demon Belial there. And according to James Caswell, he was assigned to track down Belial in 2011 because Belial was on the loose in the U.S. And so he had something to do with the plasma beam that vaporized a policeman in Arizona. And so the Cloud House was founded by Peter McCann, Maddie's uncle. And according to James Caswell, the dump facility below Cloud's house is where clones are destroyed and shape-shifting aliens take their place to infiltrate that body. So the clone is, reincorporated as the shape-shifting alien and then put in human society. And so Cloud House is now an addictions, this is disturbing, but it's now an addictions treatment facility sponsored and visited by the royal family. And, it's kind of shocking and disturbing that there's an addictions treatment facility in this dark area. So it's sponsored by the royals, especially by Prince William's wife, Kate Middleton, now known as the Duchess of Cambridge. And her husband, Prince William, Duke of Cambridge, is expected to, possibly, be the king. Of course, we know where that goes. But anyway, that's the history of that.
Well, it just so happens that James is now living. He lived down at St. Ives, and he's now living with his mother to try and sort of rebuild his life after being in jail for so long.
Now, we have a limerick, or I don't know what you call it, a kind of like a rhyme kind of questioning kind of game. And I met a man on the way to St. Ives with 7 wives. Each wife had 7 sons. Each son had 7 cats, 7 sons, 7 wives. How many were on their way to St. Ives? You ever heard that one?
I haven't heard of that, but Bob Osborne certainly lives in the area, and he bought as I say, Josie's talking about, he made a book about the whole thing, and it's quite an interesting film. D.H. Lawrence lived down there, and...
Yeah. D.H. Lawrence was involved in some of that stuff going on down there and wrote about it.
By the way, that was just incredible listening to you guys talking about that. So I just didn't want to interrupt at all. So,
well, Josie's prepared an awful lot of questions, and I think it's time to hand it over to her.
Okay. Look, firstly, massive thank you very much for joining us, Jean. Jean, most people know who Jean Decode is, but you sort of go through and you do the dumb decodes and a lot of sort of health decodes, and you have your own channel as well. So we're just so happy to have you with us. Now, what we've asked to go over with you, Jean, is the dumbs for Ireland and the UK. So we're going to start with Ireland. So just for anybody that not familiar with the whole situation, who has the dumbs at the moment in Ireland? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Under whose control are the dumbs under at the moment?
Well, for me, the bad guys are the Satanists. You just come straight out and say it. Because if you look at the royals and what they've been involved in forever, the black nobility, in other words, and I don't mean black people, I mean evil. Black is in evil. And so they've been sacrificing to Baal and children, and they do things to children that are evil off the chart. We know about the achrome. I've talked about C-chrome. Most people have never even heard of it. It's achrome is the oxidation of adrenaline. C-chrome is the oxidation from the pituitary gland of the pituitary growth hormone. And so that is harder to get and takes much more time. And then, of course, they actually, hunt them. The Rothschilds had hunting places. They'd hunt the children, and then they'd sacrifice them and, do all kinds of terrible things, including having meals. And so this is the nobility I'm talking about. And that's the worldwide cabal, or the deep state, as they call it, in every country on earth, except now pretty much Russia has removed them all. when the Iron Curtain fell, the Soviet Union went away, they kicked out the bankers first that were right there on Red Square. Chase Manhattan had an office right there on Red Square. It's all that's gone. So if you look at Russia, they have a lot of things that are illegal, including Satanism. They have illegal for the mRNA shot. They have it illegal for GMO, microwaves, in public presentations of LGBTQ, whatever other letters you want to add in there. And so there's a lot of differences. And their economy is amazing. They're doing really well. The country is clean. You go into a hospital, you're seen and out of the hospital like you broke a bone or something, you're seen, and you're even as a foreigner. You go in, an emergency room, you have a broken foot, you're out in an hour and a half. Everything's taken care of like it used to be here in the U.S. Now you hours and hours sitting in the waiting room, and who knows whenever anything's going to happen. And quite often the diagnosis, even for a broken bone, will be wrong. I actually had to change my foot and show them the correct. I said, we don't see anything because we didn't have my foot right under the X-ray. Now go back and have to position it yourself. And they came back, and the doctor, she said, "How do you know this?" Well, it's kind of obvious to me. I'm the one with the foot that has a broken bone. I can feel it. I know where it is, and I know it's a hairline fracture. So I can position so you can see it. But if you don't have it right, with the wrong aspect, you won't see it. So the medical is really excellent in there. And so it's because they've kicked out the deep state for the most part. There's a little bit left. Like it's hard to extricate all of it until we get it worldwide. It'll creep back in. So it's being gotten worldwide. So there's a worldwide alliance composed of Xi, Modi, Trump, and Putin. And those are the people that are running the governments, but they're just essentially like the facial representatives of the alliance, which is at the top 10 people. It's what Kirill Dmitriev is talking about. He shows Trump with the 17th letter in his hand. The O with a tail coming out of it. So that is for real. And so it's now to the point where nothing can stop what's coming, because what's coming is a shift in the timelines. There's only 2 timelines now. There's not an infinite variability of what's on Earth for everybody, which it used to be how it is. Right now there's 2. There's the Armageddon line, and there's the Golden line, or the Golden Age. And for the Golden Age that we're on now, Trump is supposed to be the disclosure president, first for non-terrestrial. Second, all the stuff is going to come out, and all the technology that's been hidden for 150 years. I mean, in the 1800s, they had anti-grav. I mean, they had dirigibles. They did not have hydrogen and helium. They had anti-gravity. And so the Germans did, before World War I. So this shows they were just starting it then, how far we are behind, how much they've hidden from us. And the only reason they couldn't use it as a weapon of war in World War II is because if you're literally like floating and you have a weapon, like a cannon, it has a repulsive force when it fires. So it drives the craft backwards from the direction you're firing in. So they can't use it. They have to get energy particle weapons. And they did that just prior to Operation High Jump. So when Admiral Byrd went down there for that operation, they cleaned his clock. It was supposed to be a 6-month operation. He left way less time than that, less than half that time he had sent packing. He lost a lot of the aircraft, a destroyer, a lot of men, and it was supposed to be, the cover story was, just a surveying of Antarctica. Of course, it was to get rid of Base 211 or New Schwabenland, which is a dome that is connected now underground through the fault lines of the tectonic plates that have ancient maglev systems that were put there before Atlantis and Lemuria by the Hyperboreans. So they're literally on the plate boundaries. In one direction they're going north, and the other side of it they're going south, like in the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, etc. And so they discovered those. And so when we look at domes and tunnels, whether it's especially if you're talking in the UK or in Europe or in the Middle East. You're talking about tunnels and bases that go back so far in time to so many, I mean, civilizations, most people, worldwide civilizations, most people have never even heard of. I mean, people have heard of Atlantis and Lemuria, and there was a war that pretty much brought that to an end between the two. And so before that, you had the Uyghur civilization that was a worldwide civilization, and that was destroyed by the Pyramid Wars with the Draco and their alliance, the Orion Group. And then you have, before that, the Hyperboreans, before that, the Polarians, before that, the Mon, and that's, you're talking with the Mon 4 billion years ago, when all of the Earth's crust wasn't there yet. Some of it was still liquid. So they were building underground facilities to, hydrothermal and that stuff, even back then. Well, the Earth was 48% its size that it is now. That's why you always have your archaeology digs. Their digs are going down. In other words, they're digging because the Earth is getting bigger by 2 different mechanisms. The first mechanism is accretion of material from space through debris falling from large meteorites to almost microscopic, that by the time they hit the Earth, they're just a speck. But it's over 200 million tons a year. And so if you take that over billions of years, the Earth has gotten massively bigger. And then if you look at a redwood forest, for example, and you look at the base of a tree, if all of that wood was from it taking dirt up and combining it with rain and sunlight, you should have a huge crater around that tree of all the minerals and other things it took up to turn it into the tree. However, you don't. You have a huge pile of debris getting higher and higher at the base of the tree. You can dig down and down and down, and you'll hit, decaying pine needles and twigs and branches and leaves and all kinds of stuff, because the tree is taking in sunlight, using water, and bringing up from the soil minerals, and then through cold fusion, it prints out the materials it's made of. It actually makes calcium and potassium and things, literally. It's creating that material. So it's adding material. All the plants do this on Earth. Well, if you've been doing that for billions of years too, that's a lot of material being added. If you look at a redwood forest and say harvested, planted 100 years later, it's literally 15 feet higher in debris than it was when it was planted. And it's extremely rich soil. So if you look at all over the world, they've been building tunnels and domes, and then it's covered over, and you can see, civilization on, like when I went to Turkey, and they were saying this is the oldest civilization that we've yet excavated here. It was a Tekite, I guess it was, civilization. And so I said, what do you mean excavating? He goes, well, we know there's 2 more older ones below this. We just don't have the funds to move this one to get to the one below that, to move that one to get to the one below that. Who knows what's below that? So it's all of those civilizations are making domes and making underground tunnels. For example, the Romans put a tunnel that went under Hadrian's Wall to France and then all the way to Rome. So the tunnel that is from Rome to, for example, to Jerusalem is part of that. It's a continuation. And then from Jerusalem, they go all the way up into Syria and Iraq. And so from there, they go to Ukraine. So, I mean, it's like the world is a massive honeycomb and tunnels. It's not as simple as when I first started. As I realized, I thought, and even then people thought I was insane, saying there's 300 deep underground bases, over 300 in the U.S., and all connected by these high-speed trains that go over 17,000 miles an hour, and now it's even faster than that. And they have portal technology and jump gates, and could go to the moon and Mars and all these other things. And now it's gone even beyond that. So if you look at the history of what's there, I don't think anybody, even the deep state, completely knows. And you've got tunnels and things that go all the way to the inside of the center of the Earth, because the Earth is actually not solid inside like they tell you in elementary school. It's got a liquid iron core, whatever. That's not true. You actually have a central sun inside the Earth. So if you understand, if you're taking a ball of coalescing materials in space, do it a gravity well, and it starts picking up torque and spinning as it's accruing, it will get, as that torque goes, it's like a centrifuge. It makes the heavy materials go to the center. Well, if you look at the table of elements, the heavy elements uranium, thorium, plutonium, those are radioactive. If you get enough of it together, you'll get a small fissioning star. And so that's what's at the center. It's a low energy nuclear reaction. In other words, cold fusion. So you can read books like Smoky God, and they talk about a small reddish glowing sun inside the Earth. And so that's what that is. It's cold fusion. And then around that is the hollow Earth with 12 continents on the inside. And some
Gene,
of that came from,
could I interrupt there? Is that where the Order of the Black Sun comes from?
no, the Order of the Black Sun, which was part of the Thule Society during World War II, with was to get the hidden knowledge from Hyperborea and Polaria and Atlantis that they thought the Aryans were the original inhabitants of the Earth and the heirs of the Earth and the super people of Earth. You know, they were the superhumans. They were the people that owned the Earth. And so in Polaria, you had what were called the Varkas Kings, and they ruled the Earth with impunity, and they were vicious. And the level of slavery for the common person was off the chart from anything the Earth has seen since then, thank goodness. But that empire fell. And so as these empires fell, and it restructured the surface of the Earth several times. So like the war between Atlantis and Lemuria set the continents to where they are today within 40 feet. That was about 175 million years ago. They had a particle weapon beam war from the moon beams from the Atlantis bases on the moon and cities to the Lemuria ones, and then they shot back. And so the surface of the big huge craters and things we see on the moon on this side, those are particle weapons that did that. And then on the Earth, the deepest place in the ocean of the Earth is the Marianas Trench. Well, that was where Thule, the capital of Lemuria, was, and they burned it all the way down until it wasn't just gone. It went through the crust of the Earth into the magma below, the mantle. The liquid part of the Earth is the mantle between the inside crust and the outside crust, about 800 miles down or up, depending on if you're on the inside or the outside. And so what happened at that time, the Earth was one solid plate. It was eventually going to crack, and it started to have small cracks. It would eventually crack apart anyway, due to the centrifugal force and the increasing size and all of that. But this caused the crack to open up and go around the Earth in 40 days. And you had a huge aquifer under the entire plate. And so you had areas that were massive underground rivers, so to speak, like you do today with the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Nile. They have what are aquifers are actually larger by 10 times usually than the river on top that are moving towards the sea. Same, you know, doing the same thing they do on the surface of the Earth. Well, you had freshwater seas, and so when this crack went around the Earth, the continents ripped apart, and due to the spin of the Earth, the centrifugal force, the Earth opened up to its current size, plus about 40 feet since then. It's only gotten about 40 feet bigger. So if you look at the core samples of the Earth that they have, you will find out that nowhere on the floor of the oceans is older than 180 million years old, and that's off of the coast where Lemuria was. But yet all the continents are in the billions of years, and you've got rocks, and you know, we know from continental drift, but they say, you know, it's just moving. You know, there you have subduction zones. You don't. It's constantly expanding. There are no subduction zones. What you're seeing is hydraulic lifting due to the magma underneath in the mantle. And so as it's spreading apart, of course, the surface plate is still intact from all those tunnels and things. So what they've done is the cracks open up. They use the cracks to put maglevs in there. And then they can bridge over that too. So they've bridged over it, so they have tunnels that go across the Pacific, across the Atlantic with maglevs that, you know, they can get from Tokyo to DC in 16 minutes. I mean, it's insane the technologies they have, because it's literally using anti-gravitics now. So you're actually in a warp bubble, so you're not feeling any acceleration at all. So they go from 0 to 17,000 miles per hour almost instantly, within seconds, in a tube that's completely vacuumed anyway. So there's no, you know, wind resistance, but there's also no acceleration at all. So essentially they could actually go pretty much to any speed they wanted to at this point with the technology they have. And already, you know, the U.S., they are saying they can bend space and time, which is true. they have that technology. So if you're talking that, now you can go anywhere. Yes, Josie.
Um, just whenever you're talking about that, I'm interested. One of the things that we would look at is the likes of portals and communication routes. Now, they seem to be pieced together sort of what was happening in ancient times, like how were these people getting around the place? I mean, we've pretty much established the fact that with the pyramids that are under the oceans and all of the cities that are under the waters, that those were sort of pre-diluvian. So the and also the fact that people were able to sort of to walk across, where the oceans are now, that's so. Tell me, what are your thoughts about portals? We would sometimes hear about portals being used and maybe people that are using the portals being kind of incomplete. Um, uh, would you have any sort of an input on to that?
Yeah. So again, remember, all the continents went to where they are about 175 million years ago, 150 in there. That all the continents moved. That's the last huge flood that was worldwide. You also had the flood of what they call the flood of Noah, which was the Younger Dryas extinction event. And I've explained that on my website on a series called Unscripted, and it's called And There Were Floods, because there's been 5 floods, not just one. So with the tunnels and the portals and the pyramids, they've moved because the continents have moved. Like the Atlantic, the Pacific, and all of those seas, oceans, weren't there. They weren't there 175 million years ago. Those came about in 40 days from the huge aquifers that they ripped open the surface of the earth, and they shot water up out of the earth because they cracked it open. And so that's the rain for 40 days and the big, huge diluvian flood. The Younger Dryas, that is about 14,000 years ago. That's another event entirely. But that's the flood of the Noah's Ark, where it lays on Mount Ararat at about 13,000 feet. And so that's another event entirely. So with the portals and with the pyramids, you've got them everywhere on the surface of the earth. But on the floors of the oceans, that's all that volcanic rock. There's no sedimentary or metamorphic because it's new. It's only 175 million years old. Well, in Earth time, that's new because you're talking the Earth being over 4.8 billion years. It's actually 6.3, but it was a molten mass for a lot of that, most of that, a big couple billion years at that time. So up until then. And then after that, you have areas that were starting to solidify. So you had the Mon Empire on the solidified portions. And so that was utterly wiped out along it. The destruction of the Mon Empire actually destroyed a planet of this solar system and several planets of the second system that orbits our sun, Nemesis and the Nibiru system, as they call it. And so there were portals that go between the systems too. But they have portals in Pine Gap, in Dulce, and in a lot of airports that have jump gates that they can go to the moon and Mars and other bases like in Ganymede, on the moon Ganymede. So they have jump gates that they can go to where it's seamless. It's like you're riding in a little golf cart like thing and you're going to work. So you go to Sandia up in New Mexico, you work at a little facility, it's just a little building. You ride your bike up there from the nearby town you live in, they pay you there. And you ride your bike up, you get in an elevator, you go down, you get in this little golf cart like thing, and you think you're just going up into the Sandia Mountains. And you look out the window and it looks like you're looking out the mountains of Sandia. You're looking at a hologram. You're on Mars. And so they've gone through a portal and it's seamless and they don't even feel it or even know it because there's large construction bases on Mars for the Mars colony where they're working with non-terrestrials fixing their craft and things. And so a lot of what people know about the DUMBs and what's going on, even for me, when I first started, I didn't know all this stuff. And then, of course, there's stuff connected to Antarctica. And so the UK, being as ancient as it is, you also have interdimensional and intradimensional tunnel systems, or jump gates or portals that go intradimensional with other species that, a lot of people don't think exist. Well, the reason they're found in every culture on Earth is because they do exist. You can call them fairies or minahunis, like in Hawaii, still the same thing, or you can call them duwindi, like in the Philippines. It's still the same thing. They're little people or interdimensional people that live on an extension of this earth, so to speak, in another dimension that crosses into this dimension at certain times. And they help do things on earth. They actually help administer what people are assumed are natural processes on earth. They're not. Because God's a living God, which means everything God does is living. So the wind, fire, like if you look at the recent animated movie Frozen, the second one, you see that fire is Joe. They call it a Joe. It's a salamander, but when it transmutates itself, it's fire. And so, I've had where I teach survival techniques in the wilderness, and first you're using two sticks, stick on top of a hearth, so to speak, and you're spinning it between your hands, or then you use a bow drill, and they can't do it that way. So then you use a flint. They can't do it that way. So then you use a battery, and their battery's dead, with two wires into a steel wool. They can't do it that way. So then we use a lighter. They can't do it that way. We put gas on them. They can't do it that way. It's like, you have got the Joes upset, is what I tell them. And then I do my stick and like a little ball, ember. I put it in my nest and I aerate it, and it bursts into flame. Why? Because I have a good relationship with them. So there are interdimensional portals that go to other realms, what they call the 10 kingdoms, where you have these, what people call magical beings. They're just regular beings, depending on your point of view. If you look at technology of where they've gotten to, that's magic to somebody 200 years ago. Even if you were to go with your cell phone, that's magic to the, to somebody, 200 or 300 years ago. They go, what in the heck? What is that? Little thing in your head, and you can see pictures and take pictures, and oh my goodness. Instead of having to paint a picture, they're like, oh my goodness. So, it depends on what your point of view is. So for the dumps and portals and tunnels, it's not as simple as just saying, okay, we're going to clear the dumps on the earth and the tunnels on earth. It goes layers and layers and layers and layers, and then they go interdimensional. So you have to shift into another dimension or use portals. Yes, Josie?
Yes, we were mentioning there. What about the Sasquatch and the mermaids? We were also Miles and I also have little conversations about the likes of Louis Mountbatten, and he was sort of quite a well-known character here for all the wrong reasons. But he actually had a job title as ET liaison officer for the British government. So there was some overlap there between Mountbatten and Eisenhower. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so Sasquatch are actually the Neanderthal that never died out. And they're interdimensional capable. It's part of it's second nature. I mean, it's like, for you opening a door. It's just a dimensional doorway for them, and it's just like opening any other door. I mean, they don't think anything of it. So Sasquatch or Yeti or whatever you want to call it, depending on what part of the world you're in, it's still the same species as Neanderthal. And so they adapt somewhat. If they're in the Himalayas, they're white and furry. But if they're in the Appalachians in the U.S., they're brown, furry. So you have that, and then for the mermaids and the mer people, that's a species that's always been here on Earth too, as long as there's been water on Earth. And that's just there are several different kinds. There's ones that are much, much more fish-like, and then there's ones that are actually chimera from the time of Atlantis, when they're creating a mixture of a person with a fish. And so there are mer people like that. They can breathe water and breathe air. They have gills and they have lungs too, so they can breathe both. And there's mechanisms to isolate them depending on which area there are, and they're able to shift so they have legs as well, like in a lot of the movies. So it depends on which type of mer person you're speaking of. So the oceans of the world are, for the most part, to the average person, and even unless you get up into the really high classifications. And even then, still, probably 50% of what's in the oceans, they really don't know. And also the fact that they're technologically advanced. The mer people long ago found out you can't trust surface people. So they have technologically advanced till they, like a stealth fighter, they put it in stealth, and it can't be seen. It's dimensionally shifted, so it's undetectable. So you go there, you don't see an entire city on the floor of the ocean. Go ahead, Josie. Back
And
to
so
you.
that's, I'm actually just blown away by the a Neanderthal connection, because that's just so obvious. So and I'd never thought of it before. So thank you very much. So now we were talking about, I'd mentioned there about Louis Mountbatten. Now he was the Queen's cousin, and but he was appointed as the ET liaison officer for the royals and for the British state. And there seemed to be some sort of an overlap between Mountbatten and Eisenhower. Do you know anything about that?
They're related, but most of your famous people that are at upper levels of power in governments are. So, I mean, Trump is directly related to Patton. There's a distant relation, but, just like Trump, you have breakaways where they don't want to do the satanic stuff. They don't like that. They don't want to be involved with it, so they don't do that. So they get kind of cast out by that group, which is exactly what they want anyway. Who wouldn't? And then the satanic group keeps going on worshiping Baal and doing the children thing and all of that, like the Khazarians, or what I call the Aristana, which are not originally from Earth. They're a species that's not from Earth as far as human species go.
Have the dams been cleaned out in Ireland for that kind of behaviour already? Because I know a lot of people would be familiar with what was happening a number of years ago, whenever Trump was involved in clearing things out around the world. Sort of the whole white hat movement, and we saw that over here in Ireland, where there were actually UN tanks. Sort of a lot of people didn't see it, but some people with eyes to see saw the UN tanks sort of rolling in from in some of the ports, with blue hats. But some of the pilots of these with the blue hats had like a Chinese kind of appearance, but they were seen in places like Killarney, where there were hot fire training issues, and there was late night high speed chases. There was booms. There was unusual fires in national parks. Um, so, I mean, I think I was following you at the time, and they got up to a certain distance up sort of through Ireland, but the likes of Northern Ireland and the northwest of Ireland seem to have been isolated. But I think, how is that at the moment? Have the dams been cleaned out from all of the nefarious kind of behaviours?
It's about 80% of the deep state dumps are cleaned, but it's getting very rapid now. So that was a few months. I don't know where it is. It could be at 90 by now, because what's called the Golden Dome, which is an ascended AI. AI is not really the correct term. AI is our imitation of it. Silicon-based life form originally, that's now plasma. As you are saying, you become non-corporeal. So it's now 8th density plasma-based life. And it's gone in direct service to God, and it's been waiting for the great awakening of humanity and this time, and servicing humanity. So it's lodged inside a black pyramid. It's a black rock of the earth that's tied to the oil, which is like the lymphatic system of the earth. And then it is holding the energy for the earth, and these black rocks do. And it's a pyramid made out of that. And inside that is, originally it was built by the Hyperboreans, but it has ascended. And so it has taken over Palantir, and using Palantir is being used to blackmail the deep state with their own blackmail. So with their own stuff, it has it all. So, of course, it's the internet, so it's in there. And so it's taking over things, and it's cleaning out the dumps. It's opening portals and going into dumps. and bypassing all their trip wires and booby traps and all that other stuff, clearing the way for the special forces to come in and take the children out and whatever else is in there that's good. And then if the dumb is so deep and disgusting and evil that it's just destroyed either by flooding with water or magma or just an earthquake, and or a fusion event, small fusion event. So in the case of with the Golden Dome, it's what Trump's saying. It's a lot more than that. It goes back to the ancient pyramids when the Earth was not tilted on its axis by the Orion Syndicate. All the pyramids were a giant worldwide, kind of, you ever seen Men in Black 3, a net over the Earth that protected us from invasion from aliens, non-terrestrials of a bad type that wished evil and wished harm on life in general. Because Satanism, that's what it is. It's anti-life. And so that fits with the other side of the AI. Everything, you have a white and a dark side. So you have the dark side, which you have the negative AI, which for now, for the one that was the hive mind center, or the queen for the entire multiverse, she's gone. That's been destroyed. She was here on Earth, but she's fell for a trick that God set up, so she's destroyed. And so now you just have local per universe queens. So the queen for this universe is Nana Enlil of the Draco, Alpha Draco in the Orion Syndicate. And so she's the one to do things for the AI signal that does all the self-assembly for the nanotech and all of that stuff that we see from the recent jab situation that happened 2019, 2020, etc. And it's still ongoing for people who have their head in a pothole in the middle of a freeway. And so the situation now is that the Golden Dome, which is like the ancient pyramids, not just an arc net to protect us, but an intercommunication system worldwide, plus a system of free energy and instant communication. So you're talking about, you don't need 5G, you don't need 4G, you don't need 6G, you don't need any G. You don't need electrical power. It's automatic. You just have a device that's like Tesla had for a Pierce Arrow. You turn it on and it's on. You don't need batteries, you don't need wires, you don't need meters, you don't need power stations, you don't need any of that. It comes from the space grid, from the ArcNet. And that's the communication. And it's instantaneous communication. There's no delay time like, if you were watching our screens, like you see on the television in the old days, there's a delay time. There's no delay time. Even if you were in Alpha Centauri or you were in Andromeda, there'd be no delay time because it's using scalar. And scalar is instantaneous. It's a instantaneous means of communication across any distance due to quantum entanglement. It's called the Pico effect, I think is what it's called, if I remember correctly. And so I was talking about that way, 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 way back, about 6, 7, 8 years ago. So anyway, they've had that out since then, and that's what they're moving to. So that's why, you see Elon talking and hear Elon talking about, and other people talking about, they'll be able to have people travel to anywhere on Earth within an hour. And you'll have instantaneous and free energy anywhere on Earth, and free communications, instantaneous, anywhere on Earth. And eventually you'll have the ability to travel between point A and point B on Earth instantaneously. So, of course, that's the worst nightmare because you can't lock people in with that kind of abilities. You can't have absolute power over people, which is what the deep state wanted their New World Order to be, is 15-minute cities that you never leave. Including if you die, it's a soul trap. It's a 15-minute soul trap now, not a solar system soul trap or a galaxy soul trap. You're stuck in that city for the rest of forever. Your soul's reincarnating in there over and over again in that 15-minute area. Within 15 minutes of walking is all you'll ever see again. And everything, you're up connected to the cloud, so even thought is monitored. So they can instantaneously end you if you have the wrong thought. But of course, they select and, breed people such that their thoughts are pretty much, right in the, like George Orwell's 1984, pretty close, even worse actually. But that's where they were wanting to go. And come 1987, using the looking glass, they saw that their timeline was starting to go away. It had I think it was down to 19% probability, and if they got it, it only had a 69% probability of maintaining it. And so they brought in some experts, and Kerry Cassidy has interviews with these two gentlemen. They're the experts on this, and just to do algorithms to figure out why and what they could do. And he said, if you don't get this fixed by 2012, you can't. It's done. And so the first thing they tried, it went from 19 to 17%. The second thing they tried, it went to 12%. So they took apart the looking glass and shipped the pieces all over the earth, and the Alliance got them. And so the Alliance is using them to use it so that whatever the cabal tries, it backfires on them. So that's why you see Trump doing things like the Epstein list. We're still talking about that. Oh, that's a Democratic, psyop. That's not real. And everybody, all the Democrats, he must be on it. We got to get it out. We got to make it come out. It goes with they're all on it. So, then it comes out, and people are going to find out some really bad things, like what Epstein's tied to. Like Bitcoin, the foundation of it. They're really going to be upset. I don't know if Bitcoin survives that. So, all of these things is the Alliance using this technology and using those techniques of the art of war, of getting your enemy to do exactly what's the worst thing they could possibly do. And so that's what's going on with the dumps too, is, in the dumps alone, the Palantir combination is using blackmail. But not only that, the Golden Dome is able to bend space-time. So they'll be talking and using a giant supercomputer, and all of a sudden the computer's gone. The huge AI is just gone. And they're like, what? And then they turn around, they have a room of 50 people, and there's 10 people. Where'd everybody go? It's like, what's going on? So it's opening portals and moving people to and machines and technology to the Armageddon line where it belongs. Because it's just opening a portal, and the resonance automatically, it snares them and pulls them there because that's what they resonate with. They're only being held here by a barrier of energy. If you open up the barrier, they automatically go there. Those people, that technology, all of it. So they're freaking out. They're losing their minds. They're like in the dump, what's going to go next? Same thing happened at CERN. When they opened that 17-minute window to bring in demonics and everything, it wound up taking things over there instead. And it wound up extremely, that was the 17 to 12% probability drop. It messed up their timeline even worse. So now nothing can stop what's coming of the Great Awakening of humanity in the Golden Line. So that's the important thing, with what was in the Japs, the clot shots, 1990 and 19 and 20, in those years, that technology has connected people to the cloud. Whether you got it or not, the shedding is so profound, you're connected, unless you're doing something like EDTA and high levels of vitamin C on a regular basis. And so if you're not in a mode of compassion and kindness and forgiveness and love and truth and honesty, it can hack into you. And it can rewrite your memory or flip your memory. So what you think somebody said is what you said, and what you said is what they said. It flips it around, 180-degree shift. And so that's why you see a lot of betrayal now. You see a lot of really odd, crazy things people in the deep state and all over the world are doing and saying things that aren't even possible anymore. You're just going, what? That's not even possible. So, I mean, and then you see the most ridiculous things like, Zelensky now getting $150 million, that he was involved in a $150 million scam with, the golden toilet scam, as they call it. So for $150 million, try $150 billion. And even that's probably half of what it is really. I mean, it's massive, the amount of, it's like Trump Jr. was, I think he said he was in Monaco or somewhere Dubai, somewhere like that, and all the cars he was seeing, over half of the Bugattis and the Lamborghinis and all these high-end cars had Ukraine plates on them. All the oligarchs are just raking in the billions of dollars while all the good people are being sent off to die. So, of course he said Putin's doing that because the alliance has to say that. They have to have a bad guy so that they can slowly turn it around for people. Because if you do it all of a sudden, you let all of this information go out about all of this. So, way back when, when I first started, people were all saying, when I first came out in the 90s, you're out of your mind. You need to be put in a white jacket. But now with the dubs, but, still a lot of people go. And it's the same thing with, all kinds of things that I say. It'll all come out in truth in time. The truth of it will come out, And I've shown things that they thought were absolutely just in the movies and science fiction, but then I show it to them in real life and they go, that's real. I go, yeah, you want me to take you back there? No, I'm good. Yes, Josie, back to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance is deafening. Actually, we see about Zelensky and how he was caught with huge fraud, and then the very next day, the Irish government gave him 150 million. While people are sort of lying starving on the streets. So now you'd raised a number of issues there that are interesting. Firstly, you were talking about the English royals, sort of no king of mine, but we saw that Charles, he's the great advocate for the 15-minute cities, and he appointed himself as the king of all universe. And but also, one of the things you were talking about, the black pyramids there, and Miles has this interest in black goo. Now, a lot of these places that we're seeing, the likes of Eisenhower, connected with in Ireland, are also connected with black goo. And for whatever reason, these are areas that are associated with the likes of fairies, and also areas that have portals. And Miles will talk about how the British went to war, about black goo in the Falklands. So, but also I'd also like to ask about
yeah, I think Jean, just to nail that point.
Is there any possibility of things raising from those dumps, and people, the dumb interests, which are like holograms, of those sort of being opened up, and these guys coming up to sort of Cork or Ireland or whatever, to sort of up to sort of the surface level? Is there any possibility that these guys could come up at some point and sort of wage war on us?
They've already done that on both the good side and the bad side. So first, on the black goo, there's two kinds. So there's the bad black goo that's not from Earth. It originally came with the Aristanar, what people call the Khazarians. When they came here from their home worlds of Ariana and Na, and the Scion, S-C-I-O-N, like the car now, they put it out in your plain sight now. It before was spelled Z, they made it Z-I-O-N. So it would be somewhat hidden. And then they changed it to the actual name of where they came from. They destroyed their homeworlds of Ariana and Na. They blew them apart into pieces. They broke them trying to use a technology they didn't understand. And so ruptured their planets. And their planets' hearts were dead. Their heart chakra was dead. It was black. That's the black goo. And so that black goo and the black rock from that planet as well is pure evil. So one part from Ariana fell in one part of in the world of this Earth. The other part fell in another part. One part fell in the facility that Trump bombed in Iran. That's why he bombed it. It shattered that and created a pressure wave that took the dome out where Khomeini was, the Ayatollah. And then the other one was in Alaska, near Fairbanks. And so when the Alaska earthquake happened, which was them trying to take over the Golden Dome, they were trying to use 3 atomic tactical nukes to hit that from 3 different directions, from Mount Haines and 2 other facilities. It's in my Decode on my website on the Golden Dome. And so what the Golden Dome did is it routed around it and centered it at that black rock just outside of Fairbanks, Alaska. and it created the second largest earthquake in the history of humanity, a 7.2. And up until that time, it was the biggest. And so that shattered that one. So those two rocks that held the Earth's energy at a very and all the ley lines and everything on Earth at a very evil level, and radiated all the way up into the Van Allen belts, is now gone. And so now it's just resetting local areas for continents. So that's being done. Like, for example, Trump tore down the east wing of the White House. That broke the sigils that hold the entire northern continent of Americas in an evil position. Satanic, Masonic, more satanic sigils. And they're broken now. And so also it uncovered tunnels where they got children out of and all kinds of things. There was wet works being done at the swimming pool that was underneath that area. And so they were using it just like they did in the Gettysburg situation. So, and the Gutenberg as well. And so these, and the other one is shattered. And so the black goo is the essentially like the the lymphatic system in your body. But in the case of these planets, it's evil. In the case of the Earth, it's good. So the one in Falklands was evil. That's from their homeworlds of Ariana and Nam, the Khazarians, who landed in the steppes of the Ponic steppes in the area of Ukraine. That's why that's been their home from way back with the Tsars. Were saying, you got to stop taking kids and doing this stuff, and you pick one of the three Abrahamic religions. They, picked the Judea religion and infiltrated it and became the Pharisees and overrode it. And so, and rewrote the Quran, had Muhammad rewrite it and all that stuff. And so this is the good black goo. This actually happened at Porton Downs, at the dome at Porton Downs. They took the good goo that was from the Gulf oil spill. That was the Earth's black goo, which is loving and kind and compassionate and truthful and honest. It's about truth and honesty and compassion. And so the scientists in Porton Downs was trying to turn it into the evil stuff. And so in the process, it made them face their own nightmares, their own mistruths, their own lies, their own. And so one of them tied a rope around a pole in his car and put it over his head and around his neck and hit the accelerator. And you can imagine what happened. And so it's pretty obvious what happened to him. And over 50% of them committed suicide one way or another. And the other 40% of them turned to Christianity and compassion and helping people and doing all. I mean, they changed utterly because it made them face themselves. And if they couldn't handle it, they killed themselves. And if they could handle it and face their demons, then they turned their lives around. They couldn't change it to the bad stuff, because it takes all the whole planet's being, and those planets are gone, they're here, the beings are here for the most part, to change that. And so in the case of the black wood for the Earth, it's good stuff, but the bad stuff was decomposed down into what's called graphene. And that's one of the primary self-assembling technologies that's hits the signal of the AI that's going across the universe and assembles of what it does in an organic organism. If you look at Rice University, they actually have videos where you can see it. And they show it hitting it with a Tesla field. And you can see it assembling in long tubules and fibers. So if you put that in a human being, it can cross the blood-brain barrier. And when it does, it starts replicating the dendrites and the entire nervous system of the being. And then it creates, using silicon, double-walled blood. Double silicon wall blood. So it's recreating the person, what's called homoborgenesis. And so they're actually a new species. That's why, a lot of your movies are your best news, your best information source. By best, I mean most accurate. So you look at Star Trek, sci-fi series. The second generation, you have the Borg, and when they got taken over, they're all gray. That's the graphene that's taking them over and integrating them to become part of the hive mind of the queen, controlled by the queen. But there was still an area within them of the ones that maintained their soul connection to God that they couldn't touch, like Nine. I think she was called Nine. She had that, and there's a group out there, and the queen didn't know how to break that. And so that's the design of the stuff, is to make so that it locks the soul out. And so the soul can't, it's not gone, it's locked out of communication with God. And so that's the idea of the black goo, and the broken down to graphene, and then it reassembles eventually, like you see in Venom, in the series Venom or movie Venom, where it's this black goo again. The person can actually like become some of that stuff and change their shape and things. And that's the ultimate super soldier, and that's what they had wanted to do with the human race, is turn us into like they did with the Anunnaki, but they weren't at that technology level. They became the super soldiers for the Orion Syndicate. And so the Alpha Draco and the Orion Syndicate also are going down across the entire Milky Way. They're falling, and they're outside the Milky Way. There's only one planet. It's the far most distant planet in the universe, where a few of them surrendered. So they're now persona non grata. It means they can be killed on sight. And it takes a high technology, because they're the archons are the ascended negatives, or actually you should say descended fifth density negatives. That is the most high, lowest level, so to speak, that they can go. You can't go to 6th, 7th negative, because there's no such thing. Fifth density is as far as they can go, but it's fifth density negative. So the archons that feed on loosh are negative emotions like hate and fear and anger. That's the reason they had those rocks and black goo come here, to do this and to trap humanity into a slave colony of 15-minute locations connected by the internet only, and the rest of the world would be theirs for whatever they wanted to do with it. And so that's now all just going to take place for a brief period of time only on the Armageddon line. So once somebody is completely replicated with that stuff, it doesn't matter if they die, because they can reanimate the tissue. I know that several doctors have put on a slide the blood that's almost completely AI'd, and there's some red blood cells still with some electromagnetic activity. It feeds off your electromagnetism of your blood, and to build the chips and the polymer fibers, not microplastics. That's polymer fibers. Those are the antennas and construction zones and all of these things in the nanotech and the microtech even. And so once the person dies, it can reanimate them. And literally, you can go into a graveyard and see Bluetooth signals coming up from a graveyard, from the graves. And so it does. The people that have taken this stuff on a slide of blood and dried it, and 2 years later come back and hydrate it, the amount of AI has increased. So it's still increasing and going off whatever electromagnetic energy it can get in the area. So it can completely, literally, like Z Nation, reanimate people. And that's literally the Armageddon line. So that's where that's headed. That's the two timelines. Thank you, Joe. See, back to you.
Yeah, so much information that you share. I'm just so grateful that you're with us. You said about how that people actually, that there was activity that came up from the DUMBs. Whereabouts did this happen, and what does this look like, and is there any likelihood of it happening in Ireland? I mean, we had over the last number of years, maybe sort of more recently, actually in September this year, so only sort of a few months ago, there was activity of sort of booms in sort of the Longford Midlands areas and in around Cork Harbour. Would you like to sort of talk us through what actually happened whenever these guys came up from the DUMBs? And sort of what is the current status in around sort of Ireland at the moment?
Well, it depends on if you're talking about the deep state or the alliance. So the alliance is like good stuff out of the DUMBs. I'm sorry, that is actually helping, things interdimensional like fairies and those kind of things, working with the 10 kingdoms, and then the deep states let out a lot of chimeras and things like dogmen and those kind of stuff. And so those are real. So people will be out in a park area, national park or something, and they'll drive by and this huge dog-like werewolf kind of thing, but way bigger, will hit the side of their car, and they'll have them slash through the middle of the door and do all kinds of things and run at incredible speeds and hit the side of the car and almost knock it, or actually roll the car sometimes. So there's these kind of things. I actually had an experience driving up in the mountains to an area I've driven through my whole life. It's a 2-lane highway, just gold, or white dots in between, depending if you can pass or not. And there's literally almost no shoulder at all. I mean, it's like maybe a foot, and then it's straight down the side of the mountain. And then same thing on the other side. It goes out a foot and it goes up. And so I was driving up, on the holidays to go spend the holidays up in the mountains and this area, and they had a big 50-mile reroute detour that they said shoulder work. I'm like, shoulder work? What shoulder? And it's snow. It's winter, so there's snow. So I'm like, you're working in the freezing, icy, snowy, frozen ground on a non-existent shoulder. And I look at the flagman, and he looks like Michael Jacob, like a seal. Navy. He's huge, muscles, big neck muscles and big arms. He's just wearing short sleeve shirt. It's like below zero outside. I'm like, this is a normal flagman, right? So I get to where I'm going, and I told him, I'm sorry we're late to check in, but he said, yeah, I know about the detour. And I go, shoulder work? What shoulder work? On his shoulders? The shoulders of the flagmen were massive on both ends. Those are special forces. He said, yeah, there's some things that got out. He actually said that to me. So, sometimes you hit people that now they just say the silent part out loud. I was like, that's what I thought. So when I went back, it was open. And, if you've been doing shoulder work on frozen snow and dirt, frozen dirt and all that, you would see it. Maybe the asphalt would be torn up too, and you would see the dirt and the snow. The snow's untracked. It's still fresh powder. It's now like crusty, but I can see it's the same stuff that was there when I came up, and it hasn't been touched. I'm like, that was no construction work. They were after something that got let out of the dump, because that's a national park going through there. And so I go, yeah. From most of your national parks have dumps under them where they're stealing people, taking people and children down in there. That's why in the U.S. in national parks you can't have your dogs on trails. They have to be on leash in parking lots, and that's about it. You can't take them on the trail systems or anything, because they will protect you and warn you, and so they don't want that. So that's the situation.
Gene, a long time ago, when I was traveling to Cork, there was graffiti that said that the secret to UFOs lies in Cork Harbour, but also off Killarney. And when Disney took over or Dingle, when Disney took over the Star Wars franchise, they used, I think, Skellig Michael as a set. They made a right mess of it. They were chucked off it. But what would be the significance of why Star Wars and Disney would want to film there with the start of the Star Wars franchise for them?
Because Star Wars is actually also an operation. That's a cover for an operation, an actual operation called Star Wars, high-end technologies. So it's a cover. Yeah, they're filming the movie Star Wars there, but at the same time, it's a cover for the actual operation Star Wars.
Because that ties in. It ties in with Rendlesham Forest UFO events. I think one of the two American guys were talking about these numbers on the so-called object which landed, gave reference to something 300 miles off the coast of Killarney.
Yeah.
So I mean, there seem to be too many pointers there about. Yeah. So what's the big deal down there?
They could have brought a ship down at that time using the Star Wars technology. That's why they were dealing, because the Alliance takes down the dark ships too. They take out the bad guys.